The train whistle screamed across the dusty plains of New Mexico as Beatrice Porter pressed her gloved hand against the window, watching the small town of Hillsborough emerge from the endless brown horizon like a mirage on this scorching August afternoon in 1882. Her trunk sat beside her on the wooden bench, containing everything she owned in this world, which was not much considering she had sold nearly all her possessions back in Philadelphia to afford the journey west. Inside that battered leather case were 3 dresses, her mother's pearl hairpins, a daguerreotype of her parents who had both passed from fever 2 winters ago, and the letters. Those precious letters from Samuel Whitmore, the man who had promised to marry her, to give her a new life in the territories where a woman alone could become something more than a burden to distant relatives who looked at her with thinly veiled resentment. She was 22 years old, auburn-haired with green eyes that her mother had once said looked like spring grass after rain, and she was traveling across the country to marry a man she had never met in person. The arrangement had been made through a matrimonial agency in Boston, and Samuel's letters had been kind, if somewhat formal. He owned a dry goods store in Hillsborough and needed a wife to help run the business and make a home. Beatrice needed security, a purpose, and perhaps if she was fortunate, affection might grow between them over time. The train lurched to a stop at the small station, and Beatrice gathered her belongings with trembling hands. The heat hit her like a physical blow when she stepped onto the platform, so different from the humid summers back east. This was a dry, relentless heat that seemed to pull the moisture from her skin immediately. She adjusted her traveling dress, dark blue cotton that was already making her perspire, and looked around the platform for Samuel. He had written that he would meet her at the station at 2 o'clock on Saturday, August 12th, and that they would proceed directly to the church for the ceremony. Reverend Thompson had agreed to perform the marriage, and afterward there would be a small gathering at the hotel dining room. Everything had been arranged with efficient precision through their correspondence. But as the platform cleared and the other passengers dispersed into the town, Beatrice found herself standing alone with her trunk, searching the faces of the few remaining men for someone who matched Samuel's description. Tall, brown hair, spectacles, usually wearing a vest and pocket watch. None of the men present fit that image. She waited as the sun beat down mercilessly, watching the hands on the station clock move past 2, then 2:15, then 2:30. A sick feeling began to grow in her stomach, a cold dread that fought against the oppressive heat. Surely there was some explanation. Perhaps his store had an emergency. Perhaps the clock in his shop was running slow. At 3 o'clock, a young boy approached her, his face dusty and serious beyond his years. "Are you Miss Porter?" he asked. "Yes," she said, hope flooding through her. "Did Mr. Whitmore send you?" The boy shifted uncomfortably, scuffing his worn boot against the wooden platform. "Mr. Whitmore asked me to tell you that he cannot marry you after all. He said to say he is sorry for the inconvenience and that you should take the evening train back east. He left money for your ticket." The boy held out an envelope. Beatrice stared at the envelope as if it were a snake. The world seemed to tilt around her, the heat suddenly suffocating. "Cannot marry me, but we have an arrangement. I have come all this way. What do you mean he cannot marry me?" The boy looked deeply uncomfortable, his eyes sliding away from hers. "I do not know, miss. That is just what he told me to say. I am sorry." He thrust the envelope at her more insistently, clearly desperate to complete his errand and escape. With numb fingers, Beatrice took the envelope. The boy turned and ran before she could ask anything else, disappearing down the dusty main street like a ghost. She stood there holding the envelope, unable to process what had just happened. Around her, the town continued its afternoon rhythm, completely indifferent to the fact that her entire world had just collapsed. She opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was money for a train ticket and a brief note in handwriting she recognized from the letters. "Miss Porter, I must apologize for the circumstances, but I find I cannot proceed with our arrangement. My circumstances have changed in a way I did not anticipate. Please accept this ticket money and my sincere regrets. Samuel Whitmore." His circumstances had changed. What did that mean? Had he met someone else? Had he taken one look at her stepping off the train and found her wanting? That thought sent a flush of humiliation through her that had nothing to do with the heat. She looked down at herself, at her dusty traveling dress and her sensible boots, wondering what flaw had been so apparent that a man would jilt her without even a proper conversation. But no, the boy had been sent before Samuel could have seen her. This rejection had been planned, perhaps for days. He had known she was coming, and had decided to send a child with money rather than face her himself. The cowardice of it sparked anger through her shock, a hot rage that felt better than the crushing despair. She looked around the small town, taking in the single main street lined with wooden buildings, the saloon, the general store, the hotel, the church at the far end. This was Hillsborough, New Mexico, population perhaps 200 souls in the middle of the territorial desert, and she was completely alone with no prospects and nowhere to go. The money in the envelope would get her back to Philadelphia, but back to what? Her cousin's home where she had been a burden, sleeping in a corner of the parlor and doing mending for her keep. She had left that life behind, had burned those bridges in her determination to start fresh. She had written to her cousin explaining that she was to be married, that she would have a new life. The thought of returning defeated and destitute was unbearable. No, she decided with sudden fierce determination. She had not come this far to give up so easily. Samuel Whitmore had made her a promise through his letters, and she would hold him to it. At the very least, he owed her an explanation to her face, not delivered through a child. Beatrice picked up her trunk, staggering slightly under its weight, and began walking down the main street toward what looked like a general store. That would be Samuel's establishment, surely. As she walked, she was aware of eyes watching her, curious faces in windows and doorways. A strange woman alone in a small town was an object of immediate interest and speculation. The store had "Whitmore Dry Goods" painted on a sign above the door. She set down her trunk outside and entered, a bell jingling above her head. The interior was dim after the brilliant sunlight, and she blinked, letting her eyes adjust. Shelves lined the walls, stocked with bolts of fabric, tools, canned goods, and all the sundry items needed for frontier life. A man stood behind the counter, and her heart sank when she saw him. He matched Samuel's description exactly, tall and thin with brown hair and spectacles, wearing a vest with a pocket watch chain visible. But he was not alone. Beside him stood a young woman with blonde curls and a pink dress, giggling at something he had said. As Beatrice watched, frozen in the doorway, the woman placed her hand on Samuel's arm with easy familiarity. Samuel looked up and saw Beatrice. All color drained from his face. "Miss Porter," he said, his voice strangled. "Mr. Whitmore," Beatrice said, surprised at how steady her own voice sounded. "I received your message, but I thought there must be some mistake. Surely you would not bring a woman across the country and then jilt her through a messenger boy." The blonde woman looked between them with wide eyes, her mouth forming a perfect O of surprise. "Samuel, who is this?" "This is nobody, Clara," Samuel said quickly, coming around the counter. "Miss Porter, I sent you money for the return journey. There was no need for you to come here. No need." Beatrice felt her voice rising despite her determination to remain composed. You made promises to me, sir. We have an arrangement signed and witnessed. I sold my possessions, left my home, traveled for days based on your word, and you think a few dollars absolves you of that. Samuel had the grace to look ashamed, but he also looked desperate. My circumstances changed, he said, echoing the note. Clara and I, we have an understanding now. She is from here, from a good family. It makes more sense. You must see that. What I see, Beatrice said coldly, is a man without honor who makes promises he does not intend to keep. How long have you had this understanding with Miss Clara? Before or after you wrote to me confirming our wedding date? Samuel flushed red. That is not your concern. On the contrary, it is very much my concern. I am here, Mr. Whitmore. I have traveled 2,000 miles to be your wife, and I will not simply disappear because you have changed your mind for a prettier option. Clara made an indignant sound. Samuel, make her leave. She is being hysterical. I am being reasonable, Beatrice countered. Hysterical would be screaming the walls down, which I assure you I am quite capable of doing. You brought me here under false pretenses, Mr. Whitmore, and I want to know what you intend to do about it. I gave you money, Samuel said weakly. I apologized. What more do you want from me? I want you to honor your commitment, Beatrice said. We were to be married today at the church. The arrangements have been made. If you truly will not go through with it, then I want you to tell me that to my face in front of witnesses, and I want to know why. I deserve that much. Samuel looked at Clara, who was watching with calculating eyes. The silence stretched out, broken only by the buzzing of a fly against the window. Finally, Samuel cleared his throat. Very well, he said. The church. We will go to the church and I will explain everything to Reverend Thompson. But, Miss Porter, you must understand that I cannot marry you. My decision is final. Then you will say so properly, Beatrice said. She turned and walked out of the store, hearing them follow behind her. Her heart was pounding and her hands were shaking, but she kept her head high. She had no idea what she thought she would accomplish at the church, but she could not simply slink away. Even if the outcome was the same, she needed to force Samuel to acknowledge what he had done. The walk to the church at the end of the street felt endless. The sun blazed overhead, making the air shimmer. People stopped to watch their procession. Beatrice in front with her dusty traveling dress and determined stride, Samuel and Clara following behind like reluctant participants in a parade. Word had clearly spread quickly in the small town, because a small crowd began to gather, following at a distance. The church was a simple white building with a wooden cross above the door. Beatrice climbed the steps and pushed open the door, entering the cool dimness inside. The Reverend was at the altar arranging candles, and he turned in surprise at the commotion. Miss Porter, he said, clearly confused. I was told the wedding was canceled. It seems it was, Beatrice said. But I would like Mr. Whitmore to explain why, here in this church before God and witnesses, since he did not have the courage to tell me himself before bringing me across the country. The Reverend looked shocked, his gaze moving to Samuel and Clara, who had entered behind her. The crowd that had followed them began filing in as well, filling the pews, clearly delighted by the unexpected drama. In a small town where entertainment was scarce, this was an event not to be missed. Mr. Whitmore, the Reverend said sternly, what is the meaning of this? You asked me to prepare for a wedding ceremony today. Samuel removed his spectacles and cleaned them with a handkerchief, a nervous gesture. Reverend Thompson, I apologize for the confusion. When I made arrangements with Miss Porter, I had not yet realized that my feelings for Clara ran so deep. She and I have been acquainted for several months, and over the past weeks, we have come to an understanding. I wrote to Miss Porter to explain that the arrangement was canceled, but she came anyway. You wrote 3 days ago, Beatrice interjected. After I had already left Philadelphia. You knew I was already on my way, yet you sent that letter to an empty house as if that fulfilled your obligation. The Reverend's frown deepened. Mr. Whitmore, is this true? Samuel shifted uncomfortably. I thought she might turn back if she received the letter at one of the stops along the way. I did not intend for this complication. I am not a complication, Beatrice said, her voice shaking now with anger and hurt. I am a human being who trusted you, who gave up everything because you promised me a life here, and you could not even be bothered to time your rejection properly. Clara spoke up, her voice high and carrying. Samuel does not love you, he loves me. Why would you want to force a man to marry you who does not want you? Have you no pride? The words hit Beatrice like a slap. Tears burned in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Pride, she said. Pride is not the issue here. Honor is. Promises made and broken. But you are right about one thing. I would not marry a man who treats agreements so carelessly, even if he begged me. She turned to leave, desperate now to get away before the tears could fall, before these people could see her completely broken. But as she turned, she nearly collided with a man who had just entered the church. He was tall, with broad shoulders and sun-bronzed skin, wearing a dusty cowboy hat, worn denim pants, and a dark shirt. His eyes were a striking gray, like storm clouds, and he was looking at her with an expression of concern. "Pardon me, miss," he said, his voice a low drawl that spoke of years in the territories. "I could not help but overhear. Are you really being left at the church because this fool changed his mind?" "It is none of your concern," Beatrice said, trying to move past him, but the church was filling with people, and there was nowhere to go. "Well, that seems a mighty poor way to treat a lady," the man said, looking past her to Samuel. "You sent for her and then cast her aside. That is low, Whitmore, even for you," Samuel bristled. "Keep out of this, Ashford. This does not concern you, Ashford." Beatrice filed the name away automatically, though she could not imagine why it mattered. She just wanted to escape this nightmare, to find somewhere private to fall apart. "Maybe it concerns me more than you think," the man said. He looked back at Beatrice, and there was something in his eyes that made her pause. Not pity exactly, but understanding, as if he knew what it felt like to be cast aside and humiliated. "Miss, did you really come all the way from back east to marry this man?" "From Philadelphia," Beatrice said quietly. "Not that it matters now." "It matters," the man called Ashford said firmly. He removed his hat, revealing dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. "A woman who would travel that far, give up that much on faith, that is courage. That is worth something." He paused, then said something that made the entire church go silent. "If Whitmore does not have the sense to see what he is throwing away, then he does not deserve you. But it seems a shame for you to have come all this way for a wedding that does not happen." He took a breath. "So marry me instead." The silence in the church was absolute. Beatrice stared at him, certain she had misheard. "What did you say? Marry me?" he repeated, more firmly now. "My name is Austin Ashford. I have a ranch about 5 miles outside town, 300 acres with good water and decent grazing. I have cattle, horses, and a house that needs a woman's touch. I am 30 years old, I do not drink to excess, I do not gamble, and I keep my word when I give it. That is more than can be said for some." This last was directed at Samuel with a hard look. "You cannot be serious," Beatrice whispered. "You do not even know me." "I know you traveled 2,000 miles on the promise of a stranger," Austin said. "I know you have courage and determination. I know you came in here and held your head high when most women would have fallen apart. That tells me plenty." He looked around at the gathered crowd. "Everyone here knows me. They can tell you I am a decent man. Ask any of them." Austin Ashford is one of the most respected ranchers in the territory, an older man in the pews spoke up. Honest as the day is long, helps his neighbors when times are hard. I would trust him with my life. Good man, another voice added. Fair dealer. Took in my nephew and gave him work when he was in trouble, a woman said. Never asked for anything in return. Austin gave Beatrice a slight smile. See, references, more than Whitmore gave you, I suspect. Beatrice could not process what was happening. This was insane. She could not marry a complete stranger just because he had offered. And yet, what were her alternatives? Return to Philadelphia and admit defeat. Stay in Hillsborough with no money, no prospects, and the humiliation of being the rejected mail-order bride. At least with Samuel, there had been letters, some pretense of knowing each other. This man, Austin, was offering himself to her on a moment's impulse, and she would be insane to accept. Why would you do this? She asked him. You could marry anyone. Why offer yourself to a woman you just met? Austin's expression turned serious. Honestly, because I have been alone on that ranch for 5 years since my parents passed, and I am tired of coming home to an empty house. I am tired of cooking my own meals and talking to horses because there is nobody else around. I have been thinking about finding a wife, but the women in town, well, we have known each other since we were children. There is no spark there, but you have fire in you. I saw it when you faced down Whitmore. I like that. Fire that might burn you, Beatrice said. Better than dying of cold, Austin replied. Look, I understand this is sudden. If you want to think about it, you can take a room at the hotel and we can talk properly, get to know each other. But the Reverend is here, the church is ready, and you came here for a wedding. Seems a shame to waste it. Clara made a scoffing sound. This is absurd. Samuel, tell them this is absurd. But Samuel was looking at Austin with something like fear in his eyes. There was clearly history between these two men, something unspoken, and Samuel did not seem eager to challenge the rancher directly. The Reverend cleared his throat. Miss Porter, I cannot in good conscience perform a marriage between two people who just met, unless both parties are absolutely certain. This is not a decision to be made lightly. Beatrice looked around the church at all the watching faces. She thought about the train leaving this evening, about the long journey back to Philadelphia, about her cousin's pinched face and the cold corner of the parlor. She thought about her parents who had raised her to be brave, to make the best of difficult situations. They had lost everything to fever, but before that, they had taught her that sometimes you had to take a leap of faith. She looked at Austin Ashford, really looked at him. He had kind eyes despite their intensity, and there were laugh lines at their corners. His hands were calloused from work, and he stood with the confidence of a man comfortable in his own skin. He was offering her an escape, yes, but also a chance at the life she had traveled here to find. A home, a purpose, a partner. It was insane. It was impulsive. It was possibly the worst decision she could make. Yes, she heard herself say, I will marry you. Austin's face broke into a genuine smile, and it transformed him from handsome to something more. You will not regret this, he said. I promise you that. You do not make promises you cannot keep, Beatrice said, but she found herself smiling back despite everything. The church erupted in excited chatter. Clara looked furious, Samuel looked stunned, and the Reverend looked deeply uncertain about the whole proceeding. Now, wait just a moment, Reverend Thompson said, raising his hands for quiet. Miss Porter, are you absolutely certain about this? I must ask you directly. Are you entering this marriage of your own free will without coercion? Beatrice took a deep breath. I am. I came here to build a new life, to make a home with a stranger and see if we could build something good together. Mr. Ashford is offering me the same opportunity, just with a different stranger. At least this one seems to understand the value of keeping his word. And Mr. Ashford, the Reverend turned to Austin, you are certain you wish to marry this woman whom you have only just met? More certain than I have been about anything in a long time, Austin said firmly. The Reverend sighed, but there was a slight smile on his face. Very well. If you are both determined, then I will perform the ceremony. Though I must say, in 30 years of ministry, I have never had such an unusual wedding. He gestured to the pews. Everyone, please sit down. It seems we are about to have a marriage after all. The crowd settled into the pews with barely suppressed excitement. This would be talked about for years, Beatrice realized. She would forever be the woman who was rejected on the church steps and married a cowboy instead within the hour. But as Austin took his place beside her at the altar, as she felt the solid warmth of him next to her, she found she did not care what people would say. Samuel and Clara had retreated to the back of the church, clearly not willing to leave and miss the spectacle. Let them watch, Beatrice thought with a surge of defiance. Let Samuel see what he had thrown away, even if he never realized it. Reverend Thompson opened his Bible and began the ceremony. The words washed over Beatrice in a surreal wave. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony. It was happening so fast. Just an hour ago she had been waiting on the train platform, full of nervous anticipation about meeting Samuel. Now she was standing at the altar with a different man entirely, making vows that would bind her life to his, when the Reverend asked if she took Austin to be her lawfully wedded husband. She heard her voice say, "I do," with surprising steadiness. When Austin said the same words, promising to love and cherish her, she searched his face for any sign of doubt or regret, but found only determination and something that might have been hope. "You have a ring?" the Reverend asked Austin. Austin looked momentarily stricken, then thoughtful. He reached up to his shirt and pulled out a chain that hung around his neck. On it was a simple gold band. "This was my mother's," he said quietly. "She gave it to me before she passed and told me to give it to the woman I married. I have been carrying it for 5 years." He slipped it off the chain and took Beatrice's hand. The ring was worn smooth with age and warm from being against his skin. It fit her finger perfectly, and Beatrice felt an unexpected tightness in her throat as she looked at it. "By the power vested in me by the territory of New Mexico," Reverend Thompson said, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. Mr. Ashford, you may kiss your bride." Austin looked at her, and Beatrice saw a question in his eyes. She gave a small nod, and he leaned down and kissed her gently, respectfully, a brief press of lips that nevertheless sent a shiver through her. The church erupted in applause and cheering, and when they separated, Austin was smiling at her with something like wonder. "Hello, Mrs. Ashford," he said. "Hello, Mr. Ashford," she replied, and laughed because it was either that or cry, and she had cried enough for one day. They walked back down the aisle together, and people reached out to shake Austin's hand and congratulate Beatrice. Several women pressed her hand and whispered that she had made a good choice, that Austin was a fine man. The older man who had spoken up earlier clapped Austin on the shoulder and said something about it being about time he settled down. Outside the church, the late afternoon sun was still blazing. Beatrice blinked in the sudden brightness, her head spinning from everything that had happened in the past hour. She was married to a man named Austin Ashford, a rancher she had never met before today. "I should get your trunk," Austin said. "Where did you leave it?" "At the general store," Beatrice said. "But I can get it myself. You have done enough." "Beatrice," Austin said, using her name for the first time, "you are my wife now. Let me help you. That is what husbands do." There was something about the way he said it, so matter-of-fact and determined, that made Beatrice relax slightly. "Very well," she said. "Thank you." They walked back down the main street together, and Beatrice was acutely aware of the eyes watching them from every window and doorway. Austin seemed unbothered by the attention, walking with an easy stride, occasionally nodding to people they passed. At the general store, her trunk was still sitting where she had left it. Samuel and Clara had not yet returned, probably still at the church, or perhaps avoiding the awkwardness of this moment. Austin picked up the trunk as if it weighed nothing, settling it under one arm. "Is this everything?" he asked. "Everything I own in the world," Beatrice said, trying to keep her voice light. Austin looked at her with those storm-gray eyes. "Then we will have to see about getting you more. A woman should have pretty things, dresses and ribbons and such." "I do not need pretty things," Beatrice said. "I need practical things, sturdy dresses for work, sensible shoes." "You can have both," Austin said. "But that is a conversation for later. Right now, let's get you home." Home. The word sent another wave of unreality through Beatrice. She had a home now, apparently. A ranch 5 miles outside of town. With a man she did not know. What had she done? Austin led her to where his horse was tied, a large bay gelding with intelligent eyes. "This is Ranger," he said. "He is a good horse, steady and reliable. He will carry us both without complaint." "I have never ridden a horse before," Beatrice admitted. "In Philadelphia we had trolleys and carriages." Austin looked surprised but not judgmental. "Well, you will learn. Ranch life requires knowing how to ride, but for now you just need to hold on." He secured her trunk behind the saddle, then mounted in one smooth motion. He reached down for her. "Put your foot on mine and grab my hand. I will pull you up." It was awkward and ungraceful, and Beatrice was certain she was showing far too much ankle and petticoat, but Austin pulled her up as if she weighed nothing, settling her in front of him on the saddle. "Put your arms around my waist," he instructed. "Hold tight." Beatrice wrapped her arms around him, feeling the solid warmth of his body, the muscles of his stomach through his shirt. It was shockingly intimate for a woman who had never been this close to a man before. She could smell him, a combination of leather and sage and something earthy and male that made her heart race. "Ready?" Austin asked. "As I will ever be," Beatrice said. Austin clicked his tongue and the horse began to move. They rode through town at a walk, and Beatrice was aware of everyone watching their departure. The rejected male order bride and the bachelor rancher, riding off into the sunset like something from a dime novel. It would have been funny if it were not her life. Once they left the town behind, Austin urged the horse into a faster pace. The landscape rolled past them, all dust and scrub brush and distant mountains. The sun was beginning to sink toward the western horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. It was beautiful in a harsh, unforgiving way, so different from the green hills of Pennsylvania. "Tell me about the ranch," Beatrice said, partly to distract herself from the situation, partly because she genuinely wanted to know what she was riding toward. "It was my father's," Austin said, his voice rumbling through his chest against her cheek. "He and my mother came out here in '58, bought the land cheap because nobody else wanted it. Too dry, they said. But my father found water, dug a good well, and made it work. He raised cattle, sold them to the army forts and the mining camps, made a decent living. What happened to them? Fever, both of them, in the winter of '77. First my mother, then my father 2 weeks later. I think he died of grief as much as sickness. They were devoted to each other." There was a wistfulness in his voice. "I have been running the ranch alone since then, built it up some, bought more cattle. I hire hands during busy seasons, but mostly it is just me." "That sounds lonely," Beatrice said. "It is," Austin admitted. "I never minded being alone when I was younger. Like the quiet. But lately the quiet has felt more like emptiness. He paused. What about you? What made you answer a mail-order bride advertisement? Beatrice was quiet for a moment, trying to find the right words. I was orphaned 2 years ago. Fever like your parents. My father was a clerk, and we were never wealthy, but we were comfortable. When they died, there was nothing left. I went to live with my cousin, but she made it clear I was a burden. I did sewing and mending to earn my keep, but I was just existing, not living. When I saw the advertisement, it seemed like a chance at something more, a fresh start. And instead you got rejected at the church steps, Austin said, and then married a stranger, Beatrice added. I am not sure which is more unbelievable. I know it is a lot, Austin said. I know I sprung this on you and you did not have much choice. But I meant what I said in the church. I will be good to you. I will keep my promises. And if you find, after some time, that you cannot stand living on the ranch, that you cannot stand being married to me, we can figure something out. Figure something out, Beatrice repeated. What does that mean? I do not know exactly, Austin admitted. I just want you to know that you are not trapped. I did not marry you to have someone trapped on my ranch. I want a partner, a companion. If that cannot happen, then we will find another way. His words eased something in Beatrice's chest, some fear she had been holding. Thank you, she said quietly. That means more than you know. They rode in silence for a while longer, and Beatrice found herself relaxing against Austin's solid warmth despite herself. The motion of the horse was soothing, and the landscape had a stark beauty as the sun sank lower. When they crested a ridge, Austin pointed. There, he said. That is home. The ranch spread out in a valley below them. There was a house, small but well built, with a porch across the front. A barn stood nearby, and she could see a fenced pasture with horses grazing. Cattle dotted the hillsides beyond, dark shapes against the golden grass. It looked isolated but peaceful, a place carved out of the wilderness through hard work and determination. It is beautiful, Beatrice said, and meant it. It will look better once you have had a chance to fix it up, Austin said. The house is clean but plain. I am not much for decoration. I figure you will want to make it more like a home. They rode down into the valley as the sun touched the horizon. By the time they reached the house, twilight was falling, that brief magical time when the heat of the day gave way to the cool of the evening. Austin dismounted and helped Beatrice down, his hands firm on her waist. She stood on shaky legs, sore from the ride, and looked at the house that was now supposedly her home. Austin carried her trunk up onto the porch and opened the door. Wait, he said, and before Beatrice could ask why, he scooped her up in his arms. What are you doing? She gasped, grabbing onto his shoulders. Carrying you over the threshold, Austin said with a slight smile. It is tradition, is it not, for a bride entering her new home? I think that is an old superstition, Beatrice said, but she found herself smiling too. Well, we are starting this marriage on strange enough terms. Might as well honor some traditions where we can. He carried her through the door and set her down gently inside. The interior of the house was lit only by the last light of day coming through the windows. Beatrice could make out a main room with a fireplace, a table and chairs, a kitchen area. Doors leading to what she assumed were bedrooms. It was simple but solidly built, the kind of house that could withstand the harsh territorial weather. Austin lit a lamp and warm light filled the room. Are you hungry? He asked. I have beans and some bacon. I can make coffee. It will not be fancy, but it will be filling. I could eat, Beatrice admitted. She had not eaten since breakfast on the train, and her stomach was making its displeasure known. Sit, Austin said, gesturing to the table. Let me get the fire going. Beatrice sat and watched as Austin moved around the kitchen with practiced efficiency. He got the fire going in the stove, put coffee on to boil, started heating beans in a pot. His movements were economical, those of a man who had been caring for himself for a long time. She felt useless sitting there, but she was also exhausted, the adrenaline of the day finally catching up with her. "This must all seem very strange to you," Austin said as he worked. "City girl, out on a ranch in the middle of nowhere." "Everything about today has been strange," Beatrice said. "This morning I was on a train preparing to meet my intended husband. Tonight I am sitting in a ranch house married to a different man entirely. Strange does not begin to cover it." "Do you regret it?" Austin asked, glancing at her. Beatrice considered the question. Did she regret it? She had been given a choice, admittedly a choice between difficult options, but a choice nonetheless. She could have refused Austin's offer, could have taken the train back east. Instead, she had taken a leap of faith, had chosen the unknown over the known misery. "Ask me again in a week," she said finally. "Right now, I am too tired and overwhelmed to know what I feel." Austin nodded as if he understood. He served up plates of beans and bacon, poured coffee into tin cups, and sat across from her at the table. They ate in silence for a few minutes, and Beatrice was surprised at how hungry she was. The food was simple but good, seasoned with salt and pepper, the bacon crispy. "This is good," she said. "Thank you." "You are welcome," Austin said. "Tomorrow you can cook if you like. Show me what you know. But tonight, you are a guest." "I am your wife, not a guest," Beatrice pointed out. "My wife who has had a very long day," Austin corrected. "There is time to figure out how this will work. We do not have to have everything sorted tonight." After they finished eating, Austin showed her around the house. There were 2 bedrooms, a small one that had been his parents' and a larger one that he used. There was also a washroom with a basin and pitcher, and he explained that water came from the well out back. "You should take the big bedroom," Austin said. "I will move my things to the smaller one." Beatrice looked at him in surprise. "I assumed we would share a room. We are married." Austin's expression was carefully neutral. "We are married in name, but we are still strangers." "I will not presume, Beatrice. If and when you want more from this marriage than just convenience and companionship, you can let me know. Until then, I will give you your privacy." Beatrice did not know whether to be relieved or insulted. Part of her appreciated his consideration, his unwillingness to press demands on her. But another part of her wondered if he found her unappealing, if he regretted his impulsive offer already. "Are you sure?" she asked. "I am sure," Austin said firmly. "Get some rest. We can talk more in the morning when you have had a chance to process everything." He brought her trunk into the large bedroom and lit a lamp for her. The room was spare but clean, with a large bed covered in a quilt, a dresser, and a washstand. The window looked out over the valley, though it was fully dark now and she could see nothing but stars. "Good night, Beatrice," Austin said from the doorway. "Good night, Austin," she replied. He closed the door, and she was alone for the first time since stepping off the train. Beatrice sank down onto the bed and let out a long, shaky breath. She looked at the ring on her finger, her mother-in-law's ring, though she had never met the woman. She thought about Samuel and Clara, probably celebrating their narrow escape from scandal. She thought about the church full of curious strangers, watching her marry a man she had just met. And she thought about Austin, who had offered her an escape, who had given her a choice when she had none, who was sleeping in a smaller bedroom to give her space and privacy. What had she gotten herself into? But as she unpacked her few belongings and prepared for bed, as she washed her face and changed into her nightgown, as she slipped between clean sheets that smelled of soap and sunshine, Beatrice found that beneath the confusion and uncertainty was a small seed of hope. Maybe this could work. Maybe 2 strangers thrown together by circumstance could build something real. She fell asleep to the sound of coyotes calling in the distance. a lonely, haunting sound that somehow felt like a welcome to her new life. Beatrice woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the smell of coffee. For a moment she was disoriented, not recognizing the room, and then the events of the previous day came rushing back. She was at the ranch. She was married to Austin. She dressed quickly in one of her simple dresses and braided her hair. When she emerged from the bedroom, she found Austin at the stove, cooking eggs and slicing bread. He looked up and smiled when he saw her. "Good morning," he said. "I hope I did not wake you." "No, I slept surprisingly well," Beatrice said. "What time is it?" "Near about 7, Austin said. "I have been up since 5. Ranch work starts early, but I wanted to let you sleep after yesterday. You should have woken me," Beatrice said, moving into the kitchen area. "If I am going to live here, I need to learn the routine." "There will be time for that," Austin said. "Come eat. Then I will show you around properly in the daylight." They ate breakfast together, and Beatrice found herself studying Austin in the morning light. He had washed and shaved, his dark hair was damp, and he looked younger than he had yesterday, less weathered. When he caught her looking, she quickly glanced away, feeling heat rise in her cheeks. After breakfast, Austin took her outside to show her the ranch. In the bright morning sun, everything looked different. The house was sturdy adobe with wooden shutters, the barn well maintained. The horses in the pasture were beautiful, all muscle and grace. Austin explained that he had about 50 head of cattle scattered over his 300 acres, that he grew hay for winter feed, that he sold cattle twice a year to buyers who came through the territory. "Can you ride?" he asked as they stood by the pasture fence. "I told you yesterday, I have never been on a horse except when you brought me here," Beatrice said. "Then that is the first thing you need to learn," Austin said. He whistled, and a pretty chestnut mare trotted over. "This is Rosie. She is gentle and patient. She will be good for you to learn on." Over the next hour, Austin taught Beatrice the basics of riding: how to approach a horse, how to saddle her, how to mount. Beatrice fell off twice, landing hard in the dust, but Austin was patient and encouraging, helping her up each time without making her feel foolish. "You are doing well," he said. "Most people fall off a dozen times before they get the hang of it." "I feel like I am going to be bruised for a week," Beatrice said ruefully, but she was determined. If she was going to live on a ranch, she needed to know how to ride. By the time the sun was high overhead, she could walk Rosie around the pasture without falling off, though Austin kept close by just in case. When they finally stopped, Beatrice was sweating and dusty and more exhausted than she had been in months, but she also felt a sense of accomplishment. "You did good," Austin said, helping her dismount. "A few more days of practice and you will be riding like you were born to it." They went back to the house for lunch, and Beatrice insisted on cooking. She made a simple stew from the vegetables in the root cellar and the dried beef in the pantry. It was nothing fancy, but Austin ate with obvious enjoyment. "This is better than anything I have cooked in years," he said. "I told you I am not much of a cook." "It is just stew," Beatrice said, but she was pleased. That afternoon, Austin worked on mending fences while Beatrice explored the house more thoroughly. She found the root cellar well stocked with preserved goods, the pantry organized but sparse. The house itself was clean but impersonal, lacking any decorative touches. There were no curtains on the windows, no pictures on the walls, no sign that anyone really lived here versus just existing here. She spent the rest of the afternoon sewing simple curtains from fabric she found in a trunk in the spare room. It had belonged to Austin's mother, he told her, and she was welcome to use whatever she needed. The fabric was good quality, if a bit outdated in style, and Beatrice's skilled fingers made quick work of creating curtains for the main room windows. When Austin came in that evening, dusty and tired from his work, he stopped in the doorway and stared at the curtains. "You did that today?" he asked. "It is what I know how to do," Beatrice said, suddenly uncertain. "I hope you do not mind. The fabric was just sitting in that trunk." "Mind? It looks wonderful. It looks like a home." Austin's voice was full of genuine pleasure. "My mother would be happy to see her fabric being used." Over the next several days, they fell into a routine. Austin would rise before dawn and do the morning chores, feeding the animals and checking the cattle. Beatrice would make breakfast and they would eat together. Then Austin would go out to work on whatever needed doing, mending fences, moving cattle, checking water sources, and Beatrice would work on the house. She scrubbed floors and walls, organized the pantry, made more curtains, and even a tablecloth from Austin's mother's fabric. She learned to cook on the wood stove, which was different from the modern coal stove she had used in Philadelphia. She practiced riding Rosie every day, growing more confident in the saddle. In the evenings, Austin would come in tired but always willing to talk. They would eat dinner together, and then sit on the porch in the cooling evening air. Austin would tell her about the ranch, about the neighbors scattered across the territory, about his childhood growing up in this harsh but beautiful land. Beatrice would tell him about Philadelphia, about her parents, about the life she had left behind. They were learning each other, slowly, carefully. Beatrice found that she liked Austin more as she got to know him. He was quiet but thoughtful, quick to smile when something amused him. He was patient with her endless questions about ranch life, never making her feel stupid for not knowing things that were second nature to him. He was gentle with the animals, firm but never cruel. She watched him doctor a calf that had been injured and saw the care he took, the tenderness in his calloused hands, and she caught him watching her sometimes when he thought she was not looking. His eyes would follow her as she moved around the house, an expression on his face that she could not quite read. Hunger, maybe, or longing, but also something softer. Affection, perhaps. Hope. She found herself thinking about him more than she expected. About the way his shirt stretched across his shoulders when he worked. About his laugh, rare but genuine. About the fact that he slept in the small bedroom to give her space, that he never pushed, never demanded, even though they were married and he would have every legal right. On their 1-week anniversary, if it could be called that, Austin surprised her by coming home in the afternoon with a package. "I went into town today," he said. "I got you something." Inside the package was fabric, beautiful fabric in shades of blue and green, and ribbons and lace trim. "For making dresses," Austin said. "You have been wearing the same 3 dresses since you got here. I thought you might like to make something new." Beatrice ran her fingers over the fabric, feeling the quality of the weave. This had not been cheap. "Austin, you did not have to do this." "I wanted to," he said. "You have worked so hard this week making the house into a home. You deserve something pretty." "Thank you," Beatrice said, and impulsively stood on her toes and kissed his cheek. Austin went very still, and when she stepped back, his eyes were dark and intense. "Beatrice," he said, his voice rough. "Yes. Are you happy here?" The question seemed pulled from somewhere deep inside him. Truly happy or just making the best of a bad situation? Beatrice considered the question carefully. Was she happy? A week ago, she had been heartbroken and humiliated, rejected by a man she had never even met. Now she was living on a ranch in the middle of the New Mexico territory with a man she had known for 7 days. It should have been miserable. It should have felt like a trap, but it did not. "I am happy," she said slowly. "I know that probably seems strange given the circumstances, but yes, I am happy." "Are you?" "Happier than I have been in 5 years, Austin said. "This house has felt alive again this week. You have brought light back into it." He paused, then added, "You have brought light back into me." Something shifted between them in that moment, some invisible line being crossed. Beatrice moved closer to him, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body. "I am glad," she said softly. Austin reached out and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering on her cheek. "I know we agreed to take this slow," he said. "But I want you to know, Beatrice, that what I feel for you is not just convenience or companionship. I care about you, more each day." "I care about you too," Beatrice admitted. "I did not expect to. I thought this would be a practical arrangement, a business partnership, but it is becoming something more." "Is that all right?" Austin asked. "That it is becoming more?" Instead of answering with words, Beatrice rose on her toes again and kissed him, this time on the mouth. It was different from the brief kiss at their wedding. This was deliberate, intentional, and Austin responded with a soft sound of surprise and pleasure. His arms came around her, pulling her close, and the kiss deepened into something hungry and sweet. When they finally separated, both breathing hard, Austin rested his forehead against hers. "Are you sure?" he asked. "I am sure," Beatrice said. "I do not want separate bedrooms anymore, Austin. I want to be your wife in truth, not just in name." That night, Austin moved his things back into the large bedroom, and Beatrice discovered that her husband was as gentle and patient in intimacy as he was in all things. He took his time, making sure she was comfortable, that she felt safe. And when she fell asleep in his arms afterward, listening to his heartbeat beneath her cheek, Beatrice felt something she had not felt since her parents died. She felt like she belonged somewhere, to someone. The weeks that followed were some of the happiest of Beatrice's life. She and Austin grew closer every day, learning each other's habits and preferences, building a partnership that was both practical and romantic. She learned to ride well enough to accompany him when he checked on the cattle in the far pastures. He taught her to rope and brand, to read the weather signs, to identify the plants that were good for eating versus those that were poison. She made new dresses from the fabric he had bought her, and his face lit up every time she wore one. She cooked meals that made him groan with pleasure, and he brought her wildflowers from the range, presenting them shyly like a boy with his first sweetheart. They went into Hillsborough together for supplies, and Beatrice held her head high as they walked down the main street. People stared, of course, but the talk had shifted from scandal to approval. Austin was well liked, and people seemed genuinely happy that he had found a wife, even if the circumstances had been unusual. They ran into Samuel once, outside the general store. He looked uncomfortable and would have hurried past, but Austin stopped him with a hand on his arm. "Whitmore," Austin said, his voice pleasant but with an edge of steel underneath. "I wanted to thank you." Samuel looked confused. "Thank me?" "For being foolish enough to reject the best woman in the territory," Austin said. "If you had married her like you promised, I never would have had the chance. So thank you for being a coward and a fool. It worked out well for me." Samuel flushed red and hurried away without another word. Beatrice looked up at Austin, trying not to smile. "That was unkind," she said without much conviction. "That was honest," Austin corrected. He pulled her close and kissed her right there on the main street in front of anyone who cared to watch. "I meant every word. You are the best thing that ever happened to me." In October, nearly 3 months after their wedding, Beatrice realized she had missed her monthly courses. She waited another week to be sure, then told Austin one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "I think I am with child," she said quietly. Austin went very still beside her. Then he turned to look at her, his eyes searching her face. "Are you sure?" "As sure as I can be without seeing a doctor," Beatrice said. "I am nearly 6 weeks late and I have been feeling queasy in the mornings. My mother told me once that those were the signs." "A baby," Austin said, wonder in his voice. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy about it?" Beatrice asked, suddenly uncertain. They had not discussed children, had not planned this. "Happy." Austin pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "Beatrice, I am beyond happy. I am thrilled. A child, our child." He pulled back to look at her, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "How do you feel about it?" "Scared," Beatrice admitted, "but also happy. I never thought I would have this, a home and a husband and a child. After my parents died, I thought that life was behind me. But now—" She placed her hand on her still flat stomach. "Now I have everything." They rode into Hillsborough the next week to see Doc Morrison, who confirmed what Beatrice already knew. She was pregnant, due in late May or early June by his estimate. He gave her advice about eating well and getting rest, about what symptoms to watch for, and promised to check on her regularly. As her pregnancy progressed, Austin became almost comically protective. He would not let her do any heavy lifting, insisted she rest in the afternoons, and worried if she so much as winced. Beatrice found it both endearing and occasionally frustrating, but she could not be truly annoyed when it came from such obvious love and concern. Through the winter, they prepared for the baby. Austin built a cradle from smooth wood, spending his evenings by the fire carefully carving designs into the sides. Beatrice sewed tiny gowns and blankets, marveling at how small they were. They talked about names, debated boys' names versus girls' names, and tried to prepare themselves for the reality of a baby in their quiet home. "What if I am a terrible father?" Austin asked one night as they lay in bed, his hand resting on her swollen belly. "You will not be," Beatrice said with certainty. "You are kind and patient and gentle. You will be a wonderful father." "What if something goes wrong?" he asked, voicing the fear that haunted both of them. "Childbirth is dangerous. Women die. Babies die." "I am healthy and strong," Beatrice said, taking his hand. "Doc Morrison says I am doing well. Everything will be fine." But she understood his fear because she felt it too. Her own mother had died of fever, but she had lost a baby between pregnancies when Beatrice was young, and Beatrice remembered the grief that had shadowed their house for months afterward. Childbirth in the 1880s was always risky, especially out on an isolated ranch miles from town. In late May, as spring turned to early summer and the desert bloomed with unexpected wildflowers, Beatrice's labor began. Austin rode hard for town to fetch Doc Morrison and Mrs. Campbell, an experienced midwife. The hours that followed were long and painful, and there were moments when Beatrice thought she could not endure another contraction, another wave of agony. But Mrs. Campbell was calm and encouraging, and Austin stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her forehead, whispering words of love and encouragement. Finally, as dawn broke over the ranch, a baby's cry filled the house. Beatrice collapsed back against the pillows, exhausted but elated as Mrs. Campbell cleaned the infant and wrapped it in a blanket. "You have a son," the midwife said, placing the baby in Beatrice's arms. "A healthy boy." Beatrice looked down at the tiny red face, the unfocused eyes, the miniature hands curled into fists. Her son. Their son. He had a shock of dark hair like Austin and was already showing signs of having his father's strong features. "He is perfect," she whispered. Austin, who had tears streaming down his face, touched the baby's head with a gentle finger. "A son," he said in wonder. "We have a son." They named him Andrew after Austin's father, with the middle name of Philip after Beatrice's father. Andrew Ashford, born in May of 1883 on a ranch in New Mexico, the child of two people who had found each other through the worst of circumstances and built something beautiful. The first months with a baby were exhausting. Andrew was a healthy, hungry infant who seemed to have his days and nights confused. Beatrice spent her nights nursing and soothing, catching sleep in short bursts. Austin helped when he could, walking the floor with a crying baby, changing diapers with fumbling but determined hands. "I had no idea babies were so much work," he said one evening, looking haggard as Andrew finally fell asleep after an hour of fussing. "My mother told me once that the first 3 months are the hardest," Beatrice said. "After that, they start to settle into a routine." "Your mother was a wise woman," Austin said. He looked at Beatrice, and despite the exhaustion on both their faces, his expression was full of love. "You are amazing, you know that. You gave birth less than a month ago, and here you are, taking care of him, taking care of the house, taking care of me. I do not know how you do it." "I do it because he is ours," Beatrice said simply. "Because I love him and I love you, and this is what family does." As Andrew grew, the exhaustion faded into a new kind of busy contentment. He was a happy baby, quick to smile and curious about everything. Austin was a devoted father, taking the baby with him on short rides around the property, teaching him to love the ranch from the very beginning even though Andrew was too young to understand. When Andrew was 6 months old, Beatrice and Austin took him into Hillsborough for Sunday service. It was the first time they had all gone to town together as a family, and Beatrice was aware of the stares and whispers as they entered the church. She held her head high, carrying Andrew in her arms, Austin's hand solid and reassuring at the small of her back. After the service, people gathered around to admire the baby. Several women who had been at the wedding came up to congratulate them, exclaiming over how handsome Andrew was, how much he looked like his father. Reverend Thompson blessed the baby and told Beatrice and Austin that he had never seen two people more suited to each other. "I married you both under unusual circumstances," he said with a smile, "but I have never doubted it was the right decision. God works in mysterious ways, and sometimes he brings people together through the most unlikely means." As they were leaving the church, they encountered Samuel and Clara on the steps. Clara was heavily pregnant, her face drawn and tired. Samuel looked older, more worn, and when he saw Austin and Beatrice with their baby, something passed across his face that might have been regret. "Congratulations," Samuel said stiffly. "On the baby." "Thank you," Austin said, his voice polite but distant. He had no interest in rekindling any kind of relationship with the man who had tried to ruin Beatrice's life. Clara looked at Beatrice with something like envy. "You seem happy," she said, almost accusingly. "I am," Beatrice said simply. "Very happy." There was nothing else to say. The two couples parted ways, and Beatrice did not look back. That chapter of her life was closed, a brief, painful moment that had led to something far better than she could have imagined. The years that followed were good ones. Andrew grew into a sturdy toddler, then an active boy, learning to ride almost before he could walk, following his father around the ranch with devoted attention. When Andrew was 3, Beatrice gave birth to a daughter they named Alice, after Austin's mother. 2 years after that came another son, Benjamin. The house that had once echoed with emptiness was now filled with the sounds of children, laughter and arguments, and the constant noise of a growing family. Austin expanded the house, adding more bedrooms and a larger kitchen. The ranch prospered too, growing from 300 acres to nearly 1,000 as Austin bought out neighboring homesteaders who could not make it work. Beatrice became known in the territory as a skilled seamstress, taking in work from other ranch families and earning money of her own. She also helped organize a school in Hillsborough, ensuring that her children and the children of other ranchers would have access to education, without having to travel to Santa Fe. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Austin surprised her by taking her back to the church in Hillsborough where they had married. The children stayed with a neighbor for the day, and Austin and Beatrice stood on the church steps alone. "I wanted to come back here," Austin said, "to the place where our life together really began. I wanted to tell you in this spot how grateful I am for that day, for your courage in accepting my crazy proposal, for taking a chance on a stranger." "I am the one who is grateful," Beatrice said, her eyes misty. "You saved me, Austin. You gave me a home and a family and a life I love. You kept every promise you made to me." "I will always keep my promises to you," Austin said. He pulled out a small box from his pocket. Inside was a ring, delicate gold set with small emeralds. "I know you already have a wedding ring, but I wanted to give you something more. Something that is just ours, not handed down but chosen specifically for you." Beatrice slipped the ring on her finger next to her mother-in-law's worn gold band. The emeralds caught the light, sparkling like her eyes. "It is beautiful," she whispered. "Not as beautiful as you," Austin said, and kissed her there on the church steps, in the same spot where he had first asked her to marry him 10 years ago. Life was not always perfect. There were hard years when drought killed the grass and they had to sell cattle at a loss. There was the year Andrew broke his arm falling from a horse, and Beatrice spent 3 days sitting by his bed, terrified of infection. There were arguments and disagreements, times when the stress of ranch life and raising children pushed them both to their limits. But through it all, they had each other. When Beatrice was overwhelmed, Austin would take the children outside and give her quiet to breathe. When Austin was discouraged about the ranch, Beatrice would remind him of how far they had come, of what they had built together. They were partners in the truest sense, supporting each other through the hard times and celebrating together in the good times. As their children grew, Beatrice and Austin watched with pride. Andrew became a skilled horseman and rancher, clearly intending to take over the ranch when Austin was ready to step back. Alice was bright and curious, constantly reading any book she could get her hands on, dreaming of becoming a teacher. Benjamin was the most social of the three, charming everyone he met, already talking about traveling to see the world beyond New Mexico. "They are good children," Austin said one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset. It was a warm summer evening in 1899, 17 years after their wedding, and they were no longer young. Austin's hair was beginning to gray at the temples, and Beatrice had laugh lines around her eyes. But they were still strong, still healthy, still deeply in love. "They are," Beatrice agreed. "We did well with them." "We did well with everything," Austin said. He reached over and took her hand, his thumb rubbing across the 2 rings she wore. "Do you ever think about that day, about Samuel rejecting you at the church?" "Sometimes," Beatrice admitted. "But only to marvel at how it worked out. If Samuel had married me, I would have been miserable. He was not a good man, Austin. He proved that. But you are the best man I have ever known. I thank God every day that he was foolish enough to send that boy to reject me, because it meant you could step in." "I saw you standing there with that envelope in your hand," Austin said, "looking lost and hurt and furious all at once, and something in me just knew. I knew I had to step in, had to help you. And then you turned those green eyes on me, all fire and pride despite the tears, and I was lost. I think I fell in love with you in that moment, even though I did not realize it yet." "I thought you were insane," Beatrice said with a laugh. "A strange cowboy offering to marry me on sight. But I was desperate enough to take the chance, and it was the best decision I ever made." "We took a chance on each other," Austin corrected. "And we built something real and lasting out of a crazy moment." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. From inside the house came the sound of their children talking and laughing, the noise of a family comfortable with each other. The cattle were settled in the far pastures, the horses safe in the barn. The ranch was prosperous and well managed. After 17 years of hard work and dedication, Austin and Beatrice had created a legacy that would continue beyond them. "You have any regrets?" Beatrice asked quietly. "About how we started, about marrying me so impulsively?" Austin turned to look at her, his storm-gray eyes still as intense as they had been when he first stopped her in that church. "Not a single one," he said firmly. "Every day with you has been a gift. Every moment has been worth it. You are my wife, my partner, my best friend. I love you more now than I did on our wedding day, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today." Beatrice leaned over and kissed him, a kiss that held 17 years of shared memories, of laughter and tears, of passion and comfort. "I love you too," she said against his lips. "Thank you for being brave enough to offer yourself to a stranger. Thank you for seeing something worth saving in me." "There was always something worth saving," Austin said. "I just had the good sense to recognize it." As the years continued to pass, Austin and Beatrice grew old together with grace and gratitude. They saw their children grow up and start families of their own. Andrew married a rancher's daughter from a neighboring property and took over more of the daily running of the Ashford ranch. Alice became a teacher just as she had dreamed, teaching at the school Beatrice had helped establish. Benjamin traveled as he had wanted, but always came home to New Mexico, eventually settling in Hillsboro and starting a freight business. By 1910, Austin and Beatrice were grandparents several times over, their house once again filled with the sounds of children, this time their grandchildren. They slowed down, letting Andrew handle most of the ranch work, but they were still active and engaged in the community they had helped build. On a warm evening in August of 1912, exactly 30 years after they had married, Beatrice and Austin sat on the porch just as they had so many times before. Beatrice was knitting small socks for their newest grandchild, due in September. Austin was reading a newspaper, occasionally commenting on the news from the wider world. "Hard to believe it has been 30 years, Beatrice said, setting down her knitting to look at her husband. He was 62 now, his hair fully gray, his face weathered from years of sun and wind. But his eyes were still the same storm gray, still looking at her with the same love and devotion. 30 years since I saw you standing in that church looking fierce and heartbroken," Austin agreed. 30 years since I made the best decision of my life." "We were so young," Beatrice marveled. She was 52 now, her auburn hair shot through with silver, her hands showing the marks of years of hard work. "We knew nothing about each other." "We knew enough," Austin said. "We knew we were both willing to take a chance. That was all we needed." Their daughter Alice came out onto the porch, carrying lemonade. She was 27 now, beautiful and confident, with her mother's red hair and her father's gray eyes. "Here you are," she said, setting down the glasses. "Stop talking about the old days and drink something cold. It is too hot to sit out here without refreshment." "The old days were good days," Austin said, pulling Alice down to kiss her forehead. "And they led to you and your brothers, so we will talk about them as much as we like." Alice laughed and went back inside, and Beatrice smiled after her. "We did well," she said, "with everything. The ranch, the children, our life together, we did well." "We did better than well," Austin corrected. "We did beautifully." As the sun set over the New Mexico desert, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple, Austin and Beatrice sat together on the porch of the home they had made. Behind them was a house filled with family. Around them was a ranch they had built from hard work and determination, and ahead of them were more years together, however many they were blessed with. It had started with a rejection at the church steps, with a mail-order bride left alone and heartbroken. It had continued with an impulsive offer from a cowboy who had seen something worth saving. And it had become a love story that spanned 30 years and counting. A testament to the fact that sometimes the best things in life come from taking chances on strangers who turn out to be exactly what you needed all along. Beatrice looked at the 2 rings on her finger, the worn gold band from Austin's mother and the emerald ring he had given her on their 10th anniversary, and she smiled. She had come to New Mexico expecting one life and had found something far better. She had expected duty and had found love. She had expected to make the best of a difficult situation and instead had found joy. "Thank you," she said to Austin. "For what?" he asked. "For saying marry me instead," Beatrice said simply. "For seeing me when I needed to be seen. For building this life with me." Austin took her hand, holding it gently in his calloused palm. "It was my pleasure," he said. "Every single day it was my pleasure." They sat together as darkness fell, 2 people who had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances and had created something beautiful and lasting. The ranch would continue for generations, passed down through their children and grandchildren. The love they had built would ripple outward, affecting their family and community in ways both large and small. But in that moment, on that porch, on the anniversary of the day, a rejected mail-order bride had married a cowboy instead. Beatrice and Austin simply held hands and watched the stars emerge, grateful for every moment they had been given together, grateful for the chance meeting that had changed both their lives forever, grateful for the love that had grown from the most unusual beginning into something deep and enduring and true. Their story would be told for generations in Hillsborough, the tale of how Austin Ashford had stepped in when Samuel Whitmore had failed, how he had offered himself to a stranger, and how that stranger had become the love of his life. It would be told as a romance, as an adventure, as a testament to the kind of courage it takes to choose love when circumstances are uncertain. But for Beatrice and Austin, it was simply their life, the story of how 2 people had found each other when they needed each other most, and how they had built something worth having from a moment of crisis and opportunity. It was a story with a happy ending, the kind that is only possible when 2 people commit to making it so, day by day, year by year, through all the challenges and joys that life brings. As the evening deepened and the cool desert air washed over them, Beatrice leaned her head on Austin's shoulder, and he wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. 30 years had not diminished their affection for each other. If anything, the years had deepened it, adding layers of shared experience and understanding that young love could never have. They went inside eventually, to the house filled with the quiet sounds of families settling in for the night. They climbed into the bed they had shared for 30 years, and Austin pulled Beatrice close, her back to his chest, his arm around her waist, just as they had slept for 3 decades. "Good night, my love," Austin whispered into her hair. "Good night," Beatrice replied, settling into his warmth with a contentment that came from years of trust and affection. And as they drifted off to sleep, both of them were thinking the same thing, grateful beyond words that a cowboy had been brave enough to say, "Marry me instead," and a mail-order bride had been courageous enough to say yes. It was a story that had started with rejection and heartbreak, but had transformed into something far more valuable, a love that would last them the rest of their days and beyond, a legacy that would continue through their children and their children's children. Proof that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places, and that true love can begin in the most unlikely moment when two hearts are brave enough to take a chance on each other.